Hi, I am Christine Bush, and my senior seminar research project is titled The Public Lens of Virtue, a study of Republicanism and Titanic widows in the press. Now, I have been reading about the Titanic since I was in the 3rd grade. And what started as a childhood fascination became something a lot deeper over the years for me. But it's a curiosity that's not just about the ship. It's about the people whose lives were shaped and often controlled by public opinion. So when it came time to choose a research topic, I found myself drawn to something that rarely gets discussed: how the early 20th century American press judged and interpreted the women who survived. What struck me about this is we often talk about class and heroism and engineering failure, but we almost never talk about gendered moral judgment. In my own reading over the years, I kept coming back to 3 women: Madeline Astor, Eleanor Widener, and Emily Ryerson. Now, their stories were fascinating individually, but when I put them side by side, a pattern emerged. Newspapers weren't just reporting on them, they were evaluating them against an older ideological standard: Republican virtue and Republican motherhood. This was the idea that women were responsible for nurturing moral citizenship, even if they had very little political voice. And that connection became the heart of my project. Once I started digging into newspaper archives, I realized very quickly that the press played the role of a moral judge. In the case of Madeline Astor, her remarriage was treated as a public scandal, as if choosing happiness over widowhood somehow betrayed the Republic. Articles portrayed her as selfish or frivolous, even though she was only 19 and pregnant when the Titanic sank. In the case of Eleanor Widener, her grief-driven philanthropy, especially the Widener Memorial Library at Harvard, made her the press's ideal Republican mother. Coverage was respectful, even protective, and it was the exact opposite of Madeline's. Now, Emily Ryerson surprised me the most. Her community engagement, everything from neighborhood snow shoveling brigades to international war relief efforts, showed a woman quietly expanding the boundaries of what acceptable female citizenship could look like. And the press celebrated it. So this contrast was fascinating. Same disaster, same era, 3 completely different public narratives. Now, there were a few discoveries through this process that did surprise me. The first was how openly judgmental the newspapers were. Now, I'm not naive, but some pieces really did read like morality plays and not journalism. The language about Madeline's duty to remain a widow was shockingly direct, and it caught me a little off guard. The other was how elite class shaped moral expectations. Widener's old money background insulated her, where Madeline's new money roots made her an easy target. I'd expected gender to matter, and I know class matters, but I really wasn't prepared for how strongly this elite money class amplified that judgment. Now, with Emily Ryerson, I knew her name, but I had no idea that she had been such a force in her community after the sinking. Her willingness to cross class lines and the positive press she received for it felt like finding a missing link between Victorian womanhood and the emerging new woman of the 1920s. Now, after this whole process, there's still some things that I would really love to dig into a bit more. I would love to see if there are private letters or diaries of the women surviving to compare their own voices with the press's portrayal. And then I think on top of that, it would be really interesting to compare widows of other shipwrecks like the Lusitania or the Empress of Ireland and see if this pattern was universal or if it was very Titanic specific. Most importantly, I would love to see how the portrayals in the press shift after women gained suffrage in the 1920s. I think these directions could really help turn this project into something bigger, maybe even the early chapters of a book that I could write. On the surface, this project is about 3 Titanic widows, but underneath, it's really about how societies police women's behavior and how media reinforces or challenges those expectations. In the early 20th century, newspapers held enormous cultural power. They shaped reputations, assigned morality, and essentially taught the public how to think about womanhood. By studying Astor, Widener, and Ryerson, we can see an entire nation grappling with change. We've got the rise of feminism, shifting class identities, evolving ideas about citizenship, and the beginnings of modern media influence. Their stories matter because they reveal how and why women were judged, not just as individuals, but as symbols of a nation's moral expectations. Understanding that helps us understand media bias, gender expectations, and public judgment today. And that's it. Thank you for listening.